Prime Minister, Foreign Minister, Mr. Dhillon, Ministers, Excellencies, friends, Namaskar, Sat Sri Akal, Kia ora, good evening. It's a real pleasure to be with you this evening, and I'm really privileged to be part of a set of events, including the book release that you saw just now. I'm also very conscious that it's been a few years since the Foreign Minister has been here. I can only assure you that having held the job for just about 3 years, of which 2 years were constrained by the COVID, it's been my endeavor at least to come here, and this was the soonest I could come, and if I'd known what a welcome awaited me, I assure you I'd have been here much sooner. Today, I would like to talk to you about one of the two books we released just now, the Modi at 20. And I do so not because I'm one of the contributing authors, but also as that book tells you a lot about what's happening in India, the changes that are taking place, and the importance of the leadership and the vision that guides those changes. Sometime last year, a few of us were approached on a very interesting project. Prime Minister Narendra Modi was completing 20 years continuously as a head of government. This was putting together both his state and his federal tenures. And in democratic politics, this is not a small achievement because it requires successive mandates from the people. Indeed, from the time that Prime Minister Modi entered electoral politics, he has never lost. So we were asked to reflect not just on his political success, but the change that he embodies for India. And that is the volume that we present to you today. Now, rather than reinvent the wheel, I would like to share with you the words of its individual contributors. And do bear in mind that we come from different backgrounds, professions, and even opinions. So let me start with someone who every Indian bonds with, our greatest singer, Bharat Ratna, Lata Mangeshkar. Lata Mangeshkar writes that by temperament, Narendra Bhai is not what we conventionally imagine of a politician. From my various conversations with him, I sense that his pursuits are different. He has no attachment to power. His goals are larger, to be able to do something for the people of India. His passion lies in the fact that he wants the growth story to be meaningful for every person in our country. In India's history, the name of Mahatma Gandhi is etched in golden letters because he turned the entire freedom struggle into a mass movement. In the same spirit, Narendra Bhai is turning India's development journey into a mass movement. He is connecting every citizen of India to this goal. Now, if Modi has been 20 years in office, it's obvious that he's an extraordinary politician. But not just that, he's apparently a very different one. To understand that, let us turn to the insights offered by someone who's been a very close companion in this political journey. I speak here of our Home Minister, Amit Shah. In his words, many of Modi's programs in Gujarat, the bringing of Narmada waters from South Gujarat to Saurashtra, for instance, were conceptualized with a long view. Their gestation period ran into more than one electoral cycle. Modi worked not just for the next election, but the Gujarat of the next decade and the next generation. Expectedly, the BJP too became the political vehicle of Gujarat's development aspirations for the next decade and the next generation. Modi's reasoning and his very approach required direct and constant communication. He conveyed the benefits of government programs to different audiences and stakeholders, to varied people and communities. He encouraged the BJP to do likewise, talk to people rather than speak to the media. He used the demonstration effect with finesse. He offered evidence how a project was helping populations in subregions to give an idea of what would happen to other subregions and populations as the program was taken to its logical conclusion. At election time, he spelt out not just fresh promises, but shared a report card of what he had delivered against what he had promised 5 years earlier. Now, you all know that the digital transformation has been among the central features of the Modi government's development delivery and governance improvement. Its backbone is built on the Aadhaar card that has been so imaginatively applied across a range of domains. Nandan Nilekani, the moving spirit of the Aadhaar program, recalls meeting Modi as he went across the country evangelizing the idea of Aadhaar. He recalls his first meeting with these words: "I noticed how spick and span his office was. It reminded me of the corporate office of Infosys." A 30-minute meeting went on for 90 minutes as he shared stories on how he had done development innovations in Gujarat and the many ways he was using technology. I did not have to explain much about Aadhaar. He grasped all the possibilities and the potential of Aadhaar. Of all my visits to various states and meetings with several chief ministers, he was the only one who understood that the Aadhaar document would reach 1.3 billion Indian residents, and therefore what was printed on that card was of strategic importance. There was not a single interruption during this 90 minutes, and he gave me his undivided attention. I came back feeling that I had met a very different kind of politician. Now, if Modi is associated with technology, his connection with correcting gender discrimination is no less powerful. The best account of that in this volume is by the medical entrepreneur Shobhana Kamenini, who brings out so much of what has happened because of the Prime Minister's personal conviction. The stories of girls' education, building toilets for them, replacing firewood cooking by gas, and initiating a massive financial inclusion program for women are all well known by now. But there are other bits which add texture to this narrative, from affordable sanitary pads to commissioning women in the armed forces. The badminton star, P.V. Sindhu, has a similar tale of exhortation and encouragement, this time from the perspective of the youth. She examines the paradox of how someone who's clearly not young and comes from a domain not attractive to the youth could still become their undisputed icon. The film actor Anupam Kher, whom all of you know so well, brings a very different perspective, one focused on Modi's commitment to ensure that Indians abroad are confident that the government has their back. He writes of Father Alexis Prem, a Jesuit priest from Tamil Nadu, who returned to India after being held captive by the Taliban for 8 months. The Ministry of External Affairs had confirmed that his release required efforts from the Prime Minister himself. In 2017, the Modi government ensured the release of Father Tom Ardern, a Vatican priest from India, who'd been abducted in Yemen. His release was secured through months of diplomatic negotiation. The Modi government conducted Operation Rahat to evacuate Indian nationals from Yemen when conflict and violence had escalated in 2015. Modi made a pivotal intervention in the rescue operation by directly reaching out to King Salman of Saudi Arabia and requesting safe passage for Indian evacuees by halting the bombing operations. Over 4,600 Indian citizens were safely brought back home through special flights in what was regarded as an immensely successful operation. Indeed, India's efforts were so effective that numerous countries, including the US and UK, sought our help to rescue their citizens. Eventually, India evacuated more than 900 foreign nationals from 41 countries. Even as this book came out, we were actually in the midst of another major extrication exercise called Operation Ganga. This related to 20,000 Indian students who were stuck in the fighting which is still underway in Ukraine. Reminiscent of the Yemen situation, Modi intervened directly this time with Presidents Putin and Zelensky to ensure a cessation of fighting for a designated window in 2 cities so that the students could leave safely. His commitment was similarly visible in the regular monitoring that he conducted of Operation Ganga, even though he was at that time in the midst of a major election campaign in Uttar Pradesh. The connect between Modi and the diaspora is very visible and serves as a great strength today for Indian foreign policy. 2 prominent persons of Indian origin, Manoj Ladwa and Bharai, who have long been associated with the Prime Minister, share their perspective in the book as well. In their words, people often ask us how Modi manages to fill huge stadiums, mostly out of fascination, but occasionally with suspicion. This is where the depth and breadth of Modi's fabled community connect has transcended Gujarat and the shores of India. A Modi visit brings together communities to make such events possible through what is possibly the most formidable global network of grassroots volunteers and community organizations. For instance, over 700 diverse organizations across the United States mobilized communities to make the Madison Square Garden event possible. And close to 500 small and big British Indian community organizations from diverse backgrounds came together to welcome Modi to the UK. These mammoth outreach programs have not appeared overnight. Modi has for decades built relationships from the base upwards, where he has kept in regular touch, maintained personal rapport, and enthused a genuine sense of pride and a can-do attitude among the very people who only a few years ago were regarded as not required in India by the Indian political elite. In the exercise of compiling this volume, I too had the privilege of sharing my experiences. Many of you would have heard how tough it is to keep pace with the Prime Minister. I saw how his energies were driven by a sense of mission. In pursuit of his goal to make India a leading power one day, Prime Minister is as demanding of himself, has been as demanding of the Indian system as he's been unsparing of himself. His visits abroad are legendary for their punishing schedule, a 5-day trip to Afghanistan, Qatar, Switzerland, the United States, and Mexico would probably rank as the toughest at that level. In his era, Indian diplomacy has learned to be more responsive effective, practical, and ambitious. And this has happened due to the exhortative and motivational efforts coming from the very top. If our profile is higher, responsibility is greater, delivery better, and capabilities more recognized, much of the difference is due to the leadership. The Modi brand of travel is actually quite unique. Like everything else, it is dedicated to a larger goal. That Prime Minister Modi has little appetite for conventional sightseeing is well known. What I discovered accompanying him was how strongly experiences abroad were driven by the objective of identifying and absorbing best practices. The railway station we went to in Berlin fed into his modernization plans at home. The bullet train in Japan that we boarded actually ended up as a project in India. The convention centers that we spent time, each of them had a lesson to offer, even as we set about building our own. A cleaned up river in Seoul further strengthened our resolve on rejuvenating the Ganga. The public housing in Singapore was an input into our own affordable housing schemes. As a student of history, the Prime Minister reminded me of the Meiji-era reformers in Japan who contemplated the world through the lens of changes at home. One domain where the Prime Minister has broken new ground is the sharp projection of Indian culture on the global arena. The well-known author Amish Tripathi points out that India is a civilizational state, but many post-independence leaders were actually chary of seeing it as one. Prime Minister Modi has broken that mold. He sees a clear message. We must remember who we are. This explains the initiative in the UN to recognize and celebrate the International Day of Yoga, or the effort to familiarize the world with the benefits of Ayurveda. For that matter, the reclaiming of India's Buddhist traditions and the development of the Ramayana circuit, the expansion of the World Heritage Sites and intangible heritage in India is just as important as the return of Indian antiquities back to the motherland. This approach extends to the contemporary era, such as the commemoration of the anniversaries of Guru Gobind Singh, Swami Vivekananda, Mahatma Gandhi, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, people who have shaped India's destiny over the ages. The right to practice faith across geography is another aspect reflected today in the Prime Minister's initiative to encourage the building of a temple in Abu Dhabi or seeking an expansion in the Hajj quota for Indian Muslims. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by referring to the chapter of the writer Sudha Murthy, who many of you know as a social entrepreneur and a very well-known literary personality. She speaks of Narendra Modi as deeply rooted as a banyan tree, where every part is useful to others. But there a good leader stands, tall and all alone, without any benefit for himself or herself. These are leaders entrenched in ground reality with the aim to transform the destiny of their country and their people. And that, my friends, is the reason why Narendra Modi still inspires 20 years into the office and many more still to come. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Jaishankar, for your address. We're honoured to have with us tonight the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, with us tonight. She's been recognised for her stellar achievements in India as well. And interestingly, people from other parts of the world have also expressed interest in having her come and take over and run their country. So may I now request the Prime Minister to come up on the stage and give her address, please.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui kia koutou and namaste. Good evening. It is truly wonderful and a real privilege to be with you all here this evening for the Hall of Fame Awards. And it's been my privilege to be able to attend many of these evenings over the past decade, and that makes it all the more special to finally return to full scale. I see tonight that the Indian Weekender has generously gifted 20 minutes of your time to me to speak to all of you. But having been to these awards on several occasions, I know all too well that tonight there are two very special reasons to be here. To hear from the External Affairs Minister, which is such a treat to have in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and also to honour the award winners. So this evening I will be brief. To begin with, I do want to acknowledge the Kiwi Indian community whose dedication, talent and passion we recognise this evening. And we view these awards in many ways as being emblematic of the contribution of 240,000 people of Indian descent living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We're honoured, as I said, to welcome this evening the Minister for External Affairs, Minister Jaishankar. I want to acknowledge that being the first to return to our shores as an External Affairs Minister in 20 years makes it all the more an honour to have you here this evening. I do think it speaks to the strengthening relationship between our two countries, and I know that together with our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, that you had a very significant and fruitful conversation today, as we briefly did before these awards this evening. I want to also acknowledge the High Commissioners, India and New Zealand, both here this evening. A treat to have you both in the room. Barb Dillon as Honorary Consul, Auckland Mayor Phil Goff, community leaders. And I do want to pay special tribute to the fact that you have representation so broadly across New Zealand's Parliament here this evening. I'm going to ask them briefly to stand. Our members of Parliament, not just Labour, all of them. Would you mind standing for a moment? Now, amongst these members of Parliament will be a range of different political views. However, there is a consistency amongst us all in that we see the value and importance of this relationship. And I think it's something to be proud of in New Zealand, that is something that is shared regardless of political persuasion. So I want to acknowledge all of those MPs. And now you know where to find them all as well, scattered around the room. I do want to pay special tribute to, though, this evening, our Minister of Diversity, Inclusion and Ethnic Communities, Priyanka Radhikrishnan. I want to acknowledge you, Priyanka, for your groundbreaking work as the first Minister of Indian origin in the history of New Zealand. But I also want to acknowledge you as a proud electorate MP of Mangakirkir and someone that I'm honoured to call both a colleague but also a friend. Finally, thank you again to the Indian Weekender. I know an event like this takes an enormous amount of effort, and year after year you deliver for New Zealand. In many ways tonight we celebrate here this evening the extraordinary, what sets individuals apart. But what we also celebrate are the many things that we have in common. This year we mark the 70th anniversary of the formal diplomatic relationship between India and New Zealand. And we look to the opportunities that we have from this moment forward to strengthen our ties further. First and foremost, the integral bridge or foundation between our two countries, in my mind, will always be our people. The Indian community first settled in New Zealand in the 1890s, but has since become one of New Zealand's largest ethnic communities, accounting for about 5% of our population, and here in Auckland, even higher. It's no surprise that Hindi is our 5th most spoken language. We care about the same things. In an increasingly volatile world, we care for our democratic traditions. We share an interest in a peaceful and prosperous region, a deep concern about climate change, and a passion for celebrating our diverse cultures and sporting traditions. That underpins our economic relationship, with trade between our countries continuing despite the global challenges. And here we must acknowledge the massive potential for growth. And while often the focus is on an FTA between our countries, today the Minister and I discussed the range of other opportunities that exist between us that have the potential to be just as economically beneficial, if not more so. And so with the reopening of the borders, we welcome the opportunity to re-engage, the opportunity that is exemplified by having the Minister of External Affairs here, and that follows on from last month visits by Minister O'Connor and Minister Faitiri to India as well. These engagements are a chance to deepen our relationships, but also progress our aspirations. Tonight I want to conclude my brief remarks by commending everyone involved with these awards. When we lift one up, we inspire so many others to follow. And it's the job of everyone in this room to do just that. We have so many opportunities to do so with so many notable Kiwi Indians in our midst. Sir Anand Satyanand, a former Governor-General of New Zealand and a Chancellor at the University of Waikato, neuroscientist and co-chair of the Huntington's Disease Youth Organisation, Dr. Malvinder Singh, who has been recognised here before also, founder and director of New Zealand's largest independent primary healthcare provider, Ranjana Patel. Across health, cultural governance, law, politics, there are outstanding contributions to our community and to New Zealand. You bring us optimism, you bring us hope, you bring us joy. Thank you for the privilege of being amongst you this evening. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.